Hello, and welcome to our April Yampa Valley Sustainability Council community meeting. I am Paul Boney, the Energy and Transportation Director of YVSC, and it's my pleasure to see so many of you today for this timely and important discussion. I am covering for Michelle Stewart, who unfortunately had a conflicting commitment, and she sends her regards to the group. YVSC was established as a nonprofit in 2009, and we are guided by the mission to serve as a leader, resource, and catalyst for building a sustainable and resilient Yampa Valley region. These topic-focused monthly community meetings are designed to convene community partners and members for presentations and discussions on key issues and initiatives so that we can learn together, ask questions, connect, and find ways to meaningfully contribute to the sustainable and resilient future we all need. Today, our meeting focuses on the development of the Regional Transportation Authority. We're going to call that the RTA to save some time, and the parallel development possibilities for a regional passenger rail service to our region. As you know, the 2018 Routt County greenhouse gas inventory identified that 26% of our emissions come from transportation, making it a key plank in the implementation of the CAP. And the CAP Transportation Working Group identified the study and implementation of an RTA as one of their key recommendations necessary to advance the meeting of our climate action goals and carbon reduction goals. Our featured speakers today are Steamboat Ski Corp Resorts Director of Social Responsibility, Sarah Jones, and Routt County Commissioner Sonja Macys, both of whom have been key leaders in the creation of the RTA process to date. And they will explain in their self-introductions and comments today how they have been involved in all the background that's going into the RTA. Before we get going on their presentation, I'd like to briefly cover the structure of our meeting. So Sarah and Commissioner Macys are going to present for about the first 25 minutes. Then we're going to open the floor to key partners who may be on the call who want to share briefly 2 to 3 minute updates on their work ties to the RTA. And then we'll leave 5 minutes at the end for public comment. And in between those, the public comment and any partners that want to speak, we're going to obviously entertain questions and answers for as long as we can. A little bit of housekeeping. Please remember to keep your microphones on mute. And at this time, it's my pleasure to introduce our featured speakers. And Sarah, we're going to let you go first, and then Commissioner Macys, because it's my understanding that you two have a shared PowerPoint. And I just want to express how fortunate we are to have you two leaders working in the service of our community, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Paul. And thanks everybody for coming. Yeah, Sonja Macys, representatives from the city, the county, lots of different community stakeholders have been involved in this process. And we've kind of been talking about this all as innovative transportation. And so I'll start with the RTA, and then Sonja will go to Mountain Rail. Please raise your hands if you have kind of clarifying questions, and then to Paul, what you were saying at the end, we can go into a greater discussion. So just to start us off, I'm hoping, yes. Kind of want to set the tone and kind of highlight the importance of transportation to climate action and sustainability. So when Sonja and I and others started this work, probably 3 years, well, Sonja's been working on this for a very long time, but really the Innovative Transportation Group, we identified kind of those things that relate climate action and sustainability with transportation. And this was something we started in our initial discussions with innovative transportation. Obviously, greenhouse gas emissions reduction is a key one, and it aligns, as you said, Paul, to the climate action plan and reducing both vehicle miles traveled and getting fewer and cleaner vehicles on the road. Reducing traffic, congestion, and of course, air quality. And when we think about sustainability, obviously, we don't just think about environmental, we also think about equity and economy. So equitable access to transportation is also super important for both RTA and rail. Safety. safety for multimodal and also wildlife. And then, of course, that social piece, allowing for increased access. And when you hit all of those, you'll also improve the economy by allowing more guests, residents, businesses to have more reliable transportation and mobility options. So from there, I'll start on Regional Transportation Authority. And I don't know if a lot of you are familiar with what regional transportation and a regional transportation authority or regional transportation district is, but it is an area and governments working together to define a district paid for with different options, usually sales tax or other forms of tax, to get transportation within that area. And the size of the area and the services provided really depends on what those governments working together define it. And we were lucky enough to work with funding from CDOT and with buy-in from the city, the county, the city of Craig, and the ski resort to conduct a feasibility study. And this is a lot of the information that you'll see, and this comes from that study. So here's a quick overview of that. Obviously, understanding that there's a need for regional transportation within the area, and this has been something we look back at documents as far as the 80s, that regional transportation was something that was identified for the Yampa Valley as a need. So that was the purpose of the study. These are the partners. And when you look at the slides I'll be going through and also the final report, those are the different components. And then at the end, I'll highlight the next steps. So existing conditions, I think we are all aware that there's a lot of travel specifically on 40, but also to Oak Creek and Phippsburg and Yampa. There's a lot more traffic than those roads were designed for. And we're also seeing, as this slide shows, we're seeing a lot of travel into Routt County, into Steamboat from those outlying areas. So Fair and Pierce, who are the consultants who did this work, they did quite a bit of research on current road conditions, what travel looks like, what the demographics look like within Steamboat and all the way out to Craig, to better understand what our existing conditions are and the needs for the RTA. And these were the takeaways. We see demand in regional transportation. We know that a lot of our regional transportation now is focused on winter, but we see a growing need for the summer as well. As I mentioned, Highway 40 has a lot of traffic and definitely has some safety issues. Craig, both within Craig and from Craig to Steamboat, has more unmet transportation needs than, say, Steamboat, because we have a strong SST within Steamboat. South Routt's a little bit different, and those needs are a little bit different. And as the previous slide shows, jobs and population are often mismatched. So moving on to public outreach, Fair and Peers and those of us on the advisory committee did a lot of work to make sure we heard from different people, both in person at meetings and then also online. There was a survey that went around, and I actually think we have YVSC shared that survey. Important to get input from lots of different people. We probably didn't have as much as everybody knows. There's so many meetings and so many opportunities for public engagement. It's hard to get as many people as we hope. But we did have pretty good involvement. We had 37 people at our different in-person meetings. I think we had over almost 300 people for the online survey. And basically that questions were what kind of thinking about both operational and infrastructure. And so looking at those and what they prioritize, and also looking at how you think these should be paid for, these projects should be paid for. So these were the key takeaways. Obviously, transit and active transportation was the highest from the operational side. Revenue, as always, people thought that things like visitor benefit tax or DMV fees were the highest. Nobody wants to have sales tax or property tax, so those were ranked the lowest. Unfortunately, usually what happens is what people want and what people are willing to pay for are not always aligned, but that's what we saw from the public outreach. And for top operational projects, US 40 connection whether that's bus, rail, trips to the airport or Steamboat 2 were the highest. And there were lots of comments about need for roadway safety and regional transportation improvements. And these, I'm not going to focus on these, but we will share these slides with YVSC to send out. This just shows for those identified operational projects, kind of the analysis, the criteria that were used to rank those. And the dark green are the ones that were the most beneficial, and the light green are the least. And when you look at these operational projects, things like higher frequency Craig to Steamboat buses or Steamboat 2 bus, airport ground transportation, South Route transit services, or local Craig circulator, you'll see that there's dark green, light green, and very light green on all three. So, so there isn't one that kind of identified as a winner, but it shows where different projects are meeting, operational projects are meeting different needs. And these are the identified infrastructure projects. So the core trail is identified as one. Safety fund, so for roadway improvements. Bus stops is an important one. Fare-free regional transit and parking rides. So those were all identified. The highest one on infrastructure is improvement to existing bus stops and new stops. So taking all of those projects and how they were identified by the public outreach, Fair and Pierce then looked at project costs. And you'll see below total costs and local costs. And these you'll see total costs obviously are higher than local costs. The assumption here with costs is that usually there's a 20-80 split. So for operational, 20% is local and 80% is federal. And for infrastructure costs, it's usually 40-60 split. So we do get some funds, federal funds, for our transportation work. And here are the potential project revenue. From public input, they did, Fair and Pierce really focus on sales tax revenue and motor vehicle fees, you'll see. And that's what is outlined here, depending on the sales tax rate. And then Ski Corps has also committed these funds as a lift ticket tax to support this work. So that was super fast, but trying to keep things moving and making sure that we have time for questions. This is what we identify as the formation process and what we see as the next steps. So an RTA formation, basically what we need, it's not basic at all, it's actually kind of complicated, and it is defined under Colorado law. But essentially, there's identified members of the potential RTA. Those are those different jurisdictions within an area. So establishing those members, right now the discussion is with the city of Steamboat Springs, Routt County, Craig, Moffat County, Oak Creek, and Yampa, who are now talking about it. And then we'll have to create a contract to define the RTA terms and what each member will do and what are those boundaries. And that goes through CDOT for review. Once that's done, we need to put the RTA formation, that district, to a vote. And we also identify how it will be paid for. And that is also goes to a vote. And then once that is all done, then the revenue starts to collect in the January vote following voter approval. And I think we are looking now at the number November 2025 ballot initiative. So next steps, develop a project plan and a proposed funding mechanism. I think we've decided on the ballot year is November of 2025. There's still lots of discussion that needs to be done on the boundary of RTAs. And then we do have a working group. So we've identified a representative from each jurisdiction who will be doing the work to define the boundary, really do the research into what kind of funding mechanism it is, and then creating that IGA, that intergovernmental agreement. And what we're looking to do next is actually to develop a memorandum of understanding. And this would really be defining the rules of engagement for developing that IGA and the boundaries and the funding mechanism. And then once that's all done, we'll go to draft the ballot question. And really, the next critical piece will be that voter outreach and education. So that's it. We do have, as I mentioned, we do have each member, each jurisdictional member identified. We actually are starting that kind of formal meetings on Friday. And the goal is, it's really exciting that we've come this far. We have, looking at the different jurisdictions, there's different levels of engagement and interest, but really we think the next step will be engaging another consultant to help us with looking at doing the polling, understanding what voters are willing to do in terms of funding, and really identifying what those services are and what the district will be. So happy to provide at future meetings an update on how we're doing with that progress. With that, I'm going to turn, unless there are any clarifying questions, and because I've got my screen, I don't know if there are any. With that, I can turn it over to Sonja to discuss Mountain Rail. Paul, are there any questions that I'm not seeing? Or Abby?
Don't see any.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Sarah. And do you have our slides on Mountain Rail with you as well? Awesome.
I do.
You're the best. All right. Well, thanks everybody for the opportunity to speak with you today. I think I know most everyone on the call, but I'm Sonja Macys and Routt County Commissioner. I've been serving as an elected official in your community here since about 2011, 2 terms on the Steamboat Springs City Council and 1 term on the utility board at Yampa Valley Electric. As Sarah mentioned, I do have a pretty long history working with regional transportation authorities. Really, my first experience was in 2001 when I was serving as the executive director of the Tucson Audubon Society, and we assembled a regional transportation authority in Pima County, Arizona. And one of the things that I was very proud of with that is we were able to incorporate wildlife corridors and crossings into that regional transportation authority. And now, you know, we have the benefit of looking back over a 20-year period of time and seeing the thousands of animals that are actually using that, those land bridges, those underpasses, and those kinds of things. So I did not know at the time that this was the first regional transportation authority to ever integrate wildlife crossings and corridors, but looking back at it in preparation for working on this, it was a pretty cool thing to figure out. So it's been a great project working with the Steamboat ski area. Sarah Jones, of course, as you all know, was our original executive director for the Sustainability Council. So we've been working on things together for quite a long time. And it's really an inspiring opportunity to look at some of the basic needs that we have in transportation. I think Sarah did a good job of explaining, you know, what is it that we're looking at doing. One of the things I want to stress is that the RTA and the Mountain Rail projects are 2 distinct but very complementary projects. When we think about the Regional Transportation Authority, really what we're looking at is the needs right now today and needing to make sure that we're linking that last mile with the transit opportunities. So when we talk about the basic infrastructure of a regional transportation authority, everything from park and rides to other forms of last mile transportation, you can plug that into a transit-oriented situation, whether that's a bus or a train. So as we're developing these 2 things out on a parallel path, I just want to make sure that everybody's clear that they are very complementary, and a lot of what we're doing for the RTA will support the Mountain Rail project. Sarah, if you could hit it to the next slide, please, that'd be great. So I think some of you folks have been paying attention to the media coverage of this Mountain Rail situation, but there are those of us in the Valley who've been looking at these train tracks since about 2008 or so, when the writing was on the wall as far as the coal-fired power plants going in the direction of obsolescence, and really thinking about, you know, how do we get Union Pacific to the table to figure out how to repurpose what could potentially be a stranded asset. I'll be honest with you, between about 2008 and 2014, and beyond, there wasn't a lot of traction with Union Pacific. My experience having worked with them on realigning Pamela Lane at the Botanic Park, that project alone took us 11 years when I was on the Steamboat Springs City Council. So I think there's been a lot of healthy skepticism around what is Union Pacific willing to do. That's one of the key reasons I think the conversation has changed when people sort of roll their eyes about how rail's been in the plans for since the 70s and how rail used to be a thing and it's not a thing. One of the different factors here is that Union Pacific is coming to the table actively as a participant. Part of the reason for that is that with the coal-fired power plants and freight movement, which is their cash cow, they recognize that they don't have a replacement. And so they're eager to get involved with us. The picture that you see up on the right-hand side of the screen is an event that Sarah and I attended with a bunch of local government folks back in April of 2023, and that was hosted by Union Pacific. So I say there are a couple things that are bringing them to the table. One, obviously, the obsolescence of freight on their line, but the second thing is that we have a Moffett Tunnel negotiation process going on. For those of you who are not familiar with the tunnel, it is 6 miles of stretch that basically connects the eastern part of Colorado to the west through the mountains. And it used to be that there was a Moffett Tunnel Authority comprised of a bunch of different local governments, including Routt County, that managed that tunnel and provided access to Union Pacific. And they negotiated a pretty sweetheart deal back almost 100 years ago to pay that authority about $12,000 a year for the use of the Moffett Tunnel. Well, that tunnel lease will be up in January of 2025. So we are currently participating in negotiations about the tunnel and how can we leverage our opportunity as the previous authority of the tunnel to bring Union Pacific to the table in an even more meaningful way. So they mentioned that there's been a local coalition that's kind of come together and it really organically sprung up with the ski area, Routt County, the city of Steamboat Springs, town of Hayden, also the Craig Chamber has been participating. And we really started just getting together and informally trying to bring these ideas forward. There was another tour in August of last year with CDOT officials, and I think that was probably our breakthrough moment where people really realized that mountain rail folks are organized, we're collaborative, we're all looking at the same thing. By contrast, when you look at things that are going on with Front Range Rail, there's a lot of turfiness over who gets the stop and, how do we site these things in places where we don't have easements. So compared to like a Front Range passenger rail situation, even though we don't have the population to be as competitive and appealing, we have a lot of things that they don't, as far as existing line, as far as collaborative working group and so on. So we're really well positioned. And in the fall of 2023, we were able to convince the Transportation Commission to invest $5 million in the Passenger Rail Service Development Plan. And really what the plan will do will answer all of the questions that I know you have that I won't have answers for, like how many trains, how frequently do they run, what's the cost to the passenger, and those types of things. So, those are the questions that we don't want to be speculating on because the Service Development Plan, which is slated to be completed in 2024, so in the current calendar year, will give us all of that information. And then from there, we can start to work a little more robustly on building out what it is we need. CDOT has taken this real seriously and is already moving forward with aspects of what is going to be necessary, including a request for rolling stock that would be specific to our corridor. And so when we talk about rolling stock, that means what are we going to ride in? What are we going to put on these tracks? Just so you know, the tracks have been rated for freight, which is more it's heavier duty. There are more safety requirements than passenger, if you can believe that. So we are in a situation where we have an existing line that's fully functional that Union Pacific has said we can throw down trains today and start moving people. There is one stretch of the Mountain Rail corridor that does need some improvements. So what we're thinking here is our geographic territory really starts in Denver and ends at Craig. But within that geographic territory, there are sort of two sub pieces. One is Denver to Steamboat Springs, which is more of a mountain rail train, ski train-ish type of project. And that is funded with a specific pot of money out of federal funds. And then there's the other piece, which is really South Valley to Craig. And that would have stops in Steamboat Springs, somewhere in South Valley to be determined, Steamboat Springs, one in Hayden at least, possibly two, and then ending up in Craig. And that's more of your commuter rail. And the reason I call those two out separately is just that, we're really pleased with the ski area's willingness to recognize the importance of the commuter piece of this. There definitely was a time throughout the conversation where, it would have been easier for our CDOT and lawmakers to just take on the ski train piece. quite a bit easier. And, you know, Ski Corps really stuck with us on this notion that commuter rail is where we really have the needs and we need to move forward. So we're super grateful for that. Sarah, I think we can go on to the next slide. And just to give you, a sense of the timeline, as I mentioned in last fall, we had the Transportation Commission approving the funding for the service development plan, which is underway. So Governor Polis has asked that we accelerate the timeline on this. He has gotten real excited about this. Some of y'all will remember when I was campaigning for this position in 2022, my speculation on the Mountain Rail was, a decade, just based on past experiences with Union Pacific and knowing about the coal-fired power plant closures. But, if you ask me today, I'm going to say I support Polis's crystal ball prediction that we're going to be getting there by 2026 or 2027. So it's pretty exciting to see what has happened since all of these positive energies have sort of coalesced around this project. And then, you get the governor involved and really the sky is the limit. So I don't know if I mentioned to you, by the way, did I mention that there is one needed improvement for passenger rail? I don't think I finished my thought there, but that is between the area of Bond and Steamboat Springs, there is some needed positive train control PTC update. And that's just something that is required for passenger, not for freight. So it's not actually in place in that stretch presently. We can go on to the next step. Next slide. So essentially we came together, this group of entities that sort of sprung up organically and formalized our agreement to work on this Mountain Rail project through a memorandum of understanding that was signed on to by the steering committee that you see up there on the slide. The idea really of the Mountain Rail Coalition was to come together and be the liaison between state and federal entities and our local communities in service of developing out the mountain passenger rail. So the coalition is just forming, and it is really going to be exciting to engage other people and get businesses and other local governments excited and included in this. Our state senator, Dylan Roberts, and our state representative, Megan Lukens, are incredibly supportive of this project. And we will be helping us convene sort of an informational meeting in June, probably middle of June, to really talk about, what's the update on where we're at and where we're going. Sarah, did you add another slide in there, maybe? Okay, great. So this is our call to action for you folks. We have been really tracking some legislation. So the Mountain Rail Coalition felt the need to form a little more formally in response to what we knew was coming down the pipeline at the state legislature. The first bill that we're really tracking and trying to get this funding in place is Senate Bill 24-184. This is a bill that was prepared by Senator Fenberg, who is the Senate president. The idea with this bill is to create a sustained revenue source that can be used for matching funds to pull down some of the $66 billion that has been appropriated, advance appropriations by the federal government. So what the bill does essentially is it levies a fee on rental cars, $3 a day for gas cars, $2 a day for electric vehicles. And the idea is to generate that $57 million on an annual basis to support not just mountain rail, but rail throughout the state. So if anybody's interested in writing a letter of support or testifying on behalf of your support for this bill, it will be coming up probably in the House next. It's been through the Senate Transportation and Energy, Finance, and is on the way to appropriations. But really the place where we need voices of many people and diverse opinions and perspectives is at the House, where we heard at a time TBD. We're running out of time here at the state legislature. So second bill that we're working on helping pass is 24-190. And that is, again, our own Senator Roberts and Rep. Lukens. What they have done is put together a package of really good elements of what the Moffett Tunnel renegotiation needs to look like on the one hand, and then secondly, how do we create financial incentives for businesses to relocate in coal-impacted communities and use the rail as a source of transportation for their freight. So, circling back to this question of climate action. I mean, I think we all know what it means to get cars off the road and big trucks off the road from an emission standpoint. But, you know, should we be able to get some of this manufacturing relocated into coal impacted communities, that also has the benefit of subsidizing passenger rail, which, in case you are under the impression that rail is the only subsidy for transportation, it's not. Pretty much every piece of our federal and state transportation system has some form of subsidy associated with it. So the idea here would be to really underwrite some of that subsidy by using freight. One of the things that I think is a significant co-benefit of 24-190 is that it will really potentially help local businesses. And, you know, we heard from the mayor of Winter Park, who's running a restaurant there, that, you know, how he sometimes has to basically pop off and drive somewhere to get products because, you know, either the road is closed or the trucks can't pass or whatever it is. So rail really provides a reliable alternative for shipping for businesses that we think has a lot of capacity to help us get where we need to go with passenger rail. So I think that's all I have on this particular topic. I just want to let you know that we're really excited to be talking to you guys about this. The Sustainability Council over the decades has been a really good assemblage of folks who are willing to step up and advocate. And so, you know, if you'd like to get involved with this, if you want to write a letter of support, you know, we are happy to share what we've said on these bills. And yeah, let's keep talking.
All right. Well, thank you, Sonja, and thank you, Sarah. We have a little time slot now. Is there anyone else on the call who's participating in the RTA as a partner? We've set aside folks to talk about that. So city of Steamboat, maybe the town of Yampa, if you want to share your thoughts, just kind of raise your hand and we'll go from there. Otherwise, we'll drift straight into questions and answers.
This is Sheila over in Yampa. I just, we, at this exact point, Yampa just isn't sure where we're going with it. Obviously, there's a lot of us that think it's an amazing idea. So we're looking for more information before we're able to. And we got a representative from the town board now that's going to be part of the talks with Sarah and Commissioner Macys and the board and stuff like that. So we're definitely here talking, but we just don't have any information that we can provide yet, just because I don't know. So looking forward to it, though.
Thank you, Sheila.
Thanks.
It's kind of hard for me to manage all the tiles here. Is there any other participant agencies or communities that would like to share their thoughts? All right, seeing none, now we get to the other fun part of this question. This is where we'll let you, the audience, ask your questions and get your informational needs met. So if you could just raise your hand and then Abby will unmute you, I think, and we'll let you go from there. So who wants to be first? It's a very shy group this afternoon. Tim.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Sarah and Sonja. That's a great update. I have a question on the RTA that I've heard from some people and wanted to have your thoughts on the right answer is, how is it that the airport bus is rising so high up, since that doesn't feel as much of a local need as a visitor need? I get that there's traffic, but there are other ways to commute already. So I'm just curious how that's come up in those discussions.
So I'll start and then you can fill in. So I think that is usually the first response is like, we have other forms of transportation for guests. But what Fair and Pierce is looking and what they've seen as successful in other communities is actually for employees. So it would be, you know, a more regular transportation for employees, both from Craig to the airport and from Steamboat to the airport. So that they have, Fair and Pierce has found that in other communities, because flights are irregular, that it's really looking more from employee facing. But I think that public outreach did indicate there is obviously some frustration with current transportation for guests as well. But that's the focus for this specifically.
Yeah, just to throw a couple of you know, data points at that. There are just over 500 employees who work out at the airport who travel, generally speaking, from either Craig or Steamboat Springs. There is some carpooling that happens, but at the same time, these are shifts that happen at all random hours and oftentimes before the roads are plowed or after. I'm not sure that that is going to resolve those issues, or it's going to be a peak sort of service for those employees. But then, of course, the second part of the question is that we're a victim of our own success in terms of increasing the amount of visitor traffic that happens through that airport. So this year, you might have heard we have attracted the 757, which is a practically almost 200 person seat, plane, 200 seat plane. And, it only takes one of those to cancel, or, a couple of the littler ones. And then all of a sudden you've got, hundreds of people stranded at the airport. So, those people who get stranded and want better ground transportation obviously did not participate in the survey. There are visitors mainly, but also sometimes us. But at the same time, we are recognizing the importance of better ground transportation under the assumption that our airport is not going to be moving in a backwards direction as far as passenger count.
Excellent. And then I see Diane Brower has her hand up. Diane, if you can unmute yourself, you have the floor.
Okay, well, this is not Diane, this is John Spezia, but that's good enough, right?
That's good enough, John.
There's been a discussion about having the SST funded enough so that it makes the connection between Craig and Hayden and Steamboat and the service required to keep cars from using downtown. So the SST has been kind of left out of the RTA, and some of those folks at the Transportation Committee were wondering how the connection's going to be made. There's a thought that the RTA should run straight through town because people don't like to get off and transfer. The other thought is that'll really take up a lot of time having the RTA bus run through town when it can be doing other trips and be more efficient. So what is the possibility of funding the SST a little more with something so it makes the connection, and so there's no blank loop there in the SST RTA connection? Okay.
Sarah, do you want to start that one, or should I take it?
It's up to you. We'll probably say the same thing, but I'll start and then you fill in.
Okay.
So, John, that's a great question. The RTA does not specifically fund SST. Those will be two different entities. And I think obviously the work will be done in close coordination, but we need to think of them as two separate transportation entities. Currently, SST is covering the regional bus from Craig to Steamboat. But the hope is with an RTA, that will take over the cost. Now, it could still be done in contract with SST, but really we need to think of them, and their funding will be different forms of funding as well. But I think when I think of this transportation, whether it's SST or regional or rail, this is an ecosystem of transportation, and each piece is critical to work together as an ecosystem, but they are separate, different pieces working together. Okay, Sonja, now you.
Yeah, that's, I think our advisory committee made it very clear from the beginning of our study that, Steamboat Springs Transit, while hugely important and a big part of our transportation system, is really its own animal and does really need to continue to be operated by the city of Steamboat Springs. And, Sarah mentioned taking the burden of regional transportation, which is a growing burden, out of the city of Steamboat Springs and SST. So, I think when we look at this, there was some discussion at the council level of, is this a great financial boon to the city of Steamboat Springs to release the regional transportation? And frankly, it's really not at the moment. The pressure really is taken. So the Craig Circulator being farmed out of the city's transit department really is only about a $50,000 savings. And much of that money comes from outside funding. So, I think the Transportation Committee, and thank you, John, for being a good part of that, has recommended that the transit service have its own funding source. And, I think the city is really grappling with that. There's been a lot of discussion over time about what the best way is to do that. And should it be a sales tax or some other form of voter approved initiative? So I think that's the direction that Steamboat Springs Transit Funding is going from what I have heard from conversations with the city. So yeah, thanks, John, for that question.
All right, thank you for the answers. Abby.
Yeah, thank you guys for all that information. Super helpful. I was wondering if you could give us a little background on, like, is it normal for a corporation to partner with local governments for a project like this? And kind of where does the resort come in and what impact does that have on the project?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think when we look at the RTA, Ski Corps will not be included in that IGA. It is the jurisdiction. I think we see the value of an RTA for many reasons. One, many of our employees live in Craig and Hayden, and we do now currently subsidize their bus service. We see that really important for us as a business for that. We also see obviously an opportunity and the need for additional affordable housing, and we see this RTA as a critical piece to that, again, for our employees. And we also see, whether that's additional service to the airport or to South Route or the rail, and bringing skiers from Denver to the resort is an also important piece. And of course, Alterra and therefore Steamboat has pretty aggressive 2030 climate goals, and including scope 1 and 2 and 3, and scope 3 is really that transportation piece. So we see the value for lots of different things to us as a business, and want to support, even though we cannot be part of the voting members of the RTA, is just how can we play a role in supporting the work being done.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in from the local government side of things. We are a participant in an organization called the Colorado Association of Ski Towns. And that, despite the name, is more than just Colorado. It's Idaho, it's Utah, it's Whistler up in Canada. And so we commonly share best practices. And, if you're ever interested in looking at that information, there are a bunch of different surveys about ski towns on the website, Colorado Association of Ski Towns. They publish all of the different surveys, including a recent one that we did on climate action and what are other communities doing, how are they funding their climate action plans. But at any rate, so that group shares best practices, and it is very common for the skiers to partner with local governments on transportation. They do it a bunch of different ways. For example, in Crested Butte, there's what's called an admissions tax, which is basically a tax that's levied on ticketed events and that type of thing. Some other mountain towns have imposed a lift ticket tax on the ski area. Others have sort of a negotiated settlement regarding the transportation services. I think in this case, what the ski area has done by allowing so much of Sarah's time in coordination and also funding some of these studies is a really good, strong first step. But the bigger picture commitment is to, drop in $1 million a year to the Regional Transportation Authority projects. And that's where, I think there's a desire on behalf of the ski area that serve instead of a lift ticket tax for general purposes. So I did you a solid there, Sarah.
Thanks, Sonja.
All right. Anybody else want to raise their hand? If not, I'll ask a question, but certainly want our participants to have first dibs. So I'm going to flip between screens here. Well, then I'm going to ask my question. I'm going to give you one more going, gone. And all right, so I'm going to hog the little bit of time we have left. So we have two very exciting transportation initiatives, the Mountain Rail and the RTA. How do you see, or what do you think the timeline will be where those two studies come together? Is that, what's the time frame, and how do you see those intertwining where the folks show up on the train, they still got to get somewhere, and vice versa?
Yeah. So I'll just kick that one off. I mean, I think the last mile work needs to be happening almost now, even without a regional transportation authority. I mean, I don't know about all of the folks on this call, but I do actually work out at the seasonal airport in a part-time capacity. And, you know, when you think about just having a park and ride to even do carpooling, I mean, we only have one sort of legitimate authorized park and ride. So for, you know, for my liking, we'd be working on some of these last mile pieces now, even before an RTA or anything else. But with the timing of it, assuming that the voters would vote in the affirmative to fund the thing in November of 2025, funds start being received in January of the following year, so 2026. There is some process in standing up what is essentially its own local government to some degree, special district type of approach. So, you know, the idea of other successful RTAs is that that would be stood up and ready to go the moment that you're ready to start activating. So if we assume a successful November 2025 ballot, I think we can talk about having an operational and functioning system with an RTA in 2026, which I think would coincide really nicely with the governor's timeline for the rail of 2026-27. You know, we envision that the types of places that you're going to go to jump on the train are the same last mile types of places that you might end up at a park and ride or bike and ride or whatever we want to call it. So I think you look forward to some education and outreach now, and then into 2026 is when I think the rubber is going to really meet the road. Or the
Cool.
train's going to meet the track, however we want to call it.
Yeah, we need more acronyms or more. JC, I see you have your hand up, sir.
Hey, Paul, how's it going? Thanks. So I remember getting interviewed by someone around the RTA. It was probably last year. And, you know, I know there's data on the number of cars that have been going through Hayden, going towards Steamboat. But I also wonder too, just data wise, aside from just the number of like vehicles, how many of those vehicles actually would take rail? Because, you know, you've got a lot of people coming in from Hayden and Craig. They might have work trucks or they're using their vehicle for work. So, you know, what is the real number? And maybe we don't know that. You know, I just feel like that's kind of a factor too. Paul, to your point, you know, you could put people on a train and then they get off the train somewhere and then they got to get to other parts of town, and living in a rural community, people count on like driving around to then do their shopping and all that. So it doesn't feel to me like that is the golden ticket answer, just to put the rail in. The second question would be, you know, what is the chances that the rail actually goes in? I know the governor has said things, but then actually getting the funding to other parts of the state, and then we're kind of last dibs in Northwest Colorado. So I'm not being a skeptic. Those are the questions that I had.
I'll take the second one first, which is the positioning that we have with an established track, with a willing partner with Union Pacific, with the Moffett Tunnel negotiations being up, with the local coalition that is actually harmonic and not fighting over resources. I think we are very well positioned to be the priority of the state. So I feel really good about the fact that we have the right players on the team. The Moffett Tunnel negotiation, Governor Polis plucked somebody out of the Department of Transportation who used to be Buttigieg's attorney over all of the federal departments within transportation. So the investments in capacity and personnel to make this thing a reality have given me a lot of optimism to believe that the train is happening. As far as the first question, which is the use of it, I mean, I think you're exactly right, JC, that this is not going to be for everyone. This is not going to be for the person coming in with a work truck. This is not going to be for the parent who has, you know, 2 or 3 kids with all of their different gear going to multiple activities throughout the day. I mean, that's just probably not the reality of how it's going to be used, but it could be for the high schooler in South Routt who, you know, typically would be driven to their multiple sporting events, but now can jump on the train and come into town for those types of things. One of the things that I impressed upon a single mother who says, I'm never going to be using this train, was, you know, I'm fine with that, and I will jump on the train and save you a parking space and save you a transportation and traffic headache. So, you know, I think as we grow and we start to change a little as a community, and people will hopefully lean into transit a little bit more, and make the car question a little bit more of a a secondary form of transportation, I think we will have success. But again, I don't have misgivings that this is going to be for everybody. The other piece that we don't know as well is, this question of ski train has been discussed, everything from like governors talked about hydrogen fuel cell trains that are fueled in the Craig station. And so transformational and fast and amazing. But we've also heard things like the Mountaineer, which is more of an event or an experience where it's sort of a luxury train. And so it becomes more of like you're not as concerned about getting there quickly, but you just are going for the experience. So I guess what I'd say is the range of alternatives is so broad at this point still, that it's hard to boil down exactly who the targeted end user will be and how we make that attractive to them. I mean, anecdotally, you hear quite a bit from commuters who are making that drive from Craig to Steamboat about they would jump in a vehicle. I think the other piece of evidence of that is just the fact that the Steamboat Springs Transit has had to increase the demand of those buses, and they're at capacity with what they currently have. So, we see a lot of anecdotal information, but through the service development plan, we'll be a lot better off to answer those types of questions.
Yeah, and I was just going to add exactly that, Sonja. The service development plan will be, they're actually asking us for some data already to really understand the existing conditions and what that might look like moving forward in terms of commuter. I think too, and I didn't see Jennifer Holloway on here, but one of the things that Craig is really looking at is they're seeing the train as an opportunity to get more people to come, more visitors to come to Craig. So they see that as an economic diversification opportunity. And so we can't, I think we think about, okay, who's going to commute from Craig to Steamboat on a train, but I think there's a lot broader use of the train than just those commuters to Craig or Hayden to Steamboat. So.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate the responses. I had one other question, but I'll kick back and see if there's any other ones.
Yeah, thank you, JC, because I have to be the time monitor here. There are a couple of folks that wanted to make public comment. I'd like to make sure we get them in, and then if we have a few more minutes, we can take another question or two.
And JC, you can follow up with us after too, if your question doesn't get answered.
Thanks so much.
Tim.
Yeah, this is an announcement on behalf of the Routt Wildfire Mitigation Council. Just wanted folks to know that in the month of May, we're going to be holding 4 local community hearings and discussions about the recently released Routt County Community Wildfire Protection Plan. There'll be a May 2nd event in West Routt and Hayden, May 8th in Oak Creek for South Routt, May 14th in Clark for North Routt, and May 16th at the library in Steamboat Springs. There's information on the details at routtwildfire.org. I'll put it in the chat, and it'd be great if any of you have ways to get the word out. These will be really important sessions to get people knowledgeable about what they need to be doing and can be doing, and the resources available to homeowners, HOAs, and communities to take action to be more wildfire prepared. So thanks.
Thank you, Tim. And anyone else on the call that has an announcement?
Susie Romig.
Go ahead, Susie.
I realize that next week is spring break, but for Earth Day, which is the 22nd Monday, if any of the environmental groups or organizations on the call has anything that they could say is tied to Earth Day 2024 that you would like to get into a roundup story that will run Monday, could you please email me? I put my email in the chat, but it's sromig, SROMIG at steamboatpilot.com. For example, the Routt County Cleanup Day is May 18th. That's obvious. But if you have anything that you could connect directly or somewhat connected to Earth Day, please email me for the story on Monday. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie. Any other public comments or notices? All right, well, that gives us time for another question or two on this great transportation topic. Anyone come up with a question or hanging back a little bit? We have a few minutes left in today's agenda. Well, with that then, with no hands raised, I just want to thank our speakers and all of you participants for joining this month's community meeting, and we hope to see you at our next community meeting. And again, thank you for your time and enjoy the rest of your day.